Namaste everyone. Welcome to Citti Media, the Festival of Bharat. This is your host Sharan, and this is one of my first long form talk show. And with us we have today Sri Prakash Belawadi ji, and he needs no introduction. He is a theatre personality, an actor, an activist, a journalist, and a teacher, and a national award winner as well. A lot of titles to his credit. And with us today, he will be sharing his views on a lot of things from Indian polity to Bollywood movies. Prakash ji, thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to the Festival of Bharat.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you for having me.
Sir, first of all, you recently directed a play, Parva, by Sri S.L. Bhairappa, and that was a long process. It was a long journey from what we talked about earlier. Could you share your entire journey, the history behind it to our viewers?
I am not from the world of literature. Most of my encounters with literature have been because of fun reading from my school and college days, because I was in a group that would read books. So just to be part of the group, I was influenced and I would be reading books. And later, my mother, when I was doing engineering, my mother actually decided to do her MA in journalism, although she had a government job with ESI Corporation. So she would be really tired after working all day and then doing rehearsals or shows, because she was also an amateur theater actress. And she would come home and ask me to read the books because she would be too tired. So I would read all this usual English literature, things like Shelley, Keats, Yeats, and stuff like that. Otherwise, I've read pulp fiction, and I've read a lot of some serious stuff too, but because it touches my interest, supposing I'm doing a play, or if I'm interested, if I'm to write an article on something, then I would do research, and that would interest me and I would read. But I've not systematically read books, so I wouldn't call myself an academic or an intellectual, because in India, only if you've read literature, also recommended literature, you'll be considered an intellectual. So I accept that definition. I'm not an intellectual. And I certainly haven't read much of Kannada literature. I've read some. I've not read much. But I had read, S.L. Bhairappa's Parva. Incidentally, I'd read it in English first. And I had read about 5 other books of his, also completely by accident, not to, because there would be some argument, and then, I would, just to find out what he had written pertaining to that argument, I would pick up a book and read. But Parva I had read, and about 8 or 10 years ago, maybe 8 years ago, I called him once and I said, I want to do this play. This is a play. And he said, how will you do it? And I told him that that I'll work out some structure for it, but because I've done adapted literary works before. And he said, in Kannada, he said, please don't try and make a Karna some Naxal leader, or Kunti some Naxalite mother, and stuff like that, he said. I started laughing. But actually, I felt a little bit intimidated because it was see, the other books have a single running narrative, and they lend themselves to easier stage adaptation when you want to do a regular play which runs 2 or 3 hours. But Parva is it's very dense, with not only with meaning and argument, really, and a lot of drama and conflict within the characters. But it is also sequential in many ways, because he goes through the minds of different key characters that appear in the Mahabharata. And so I thought, it'll be really difficult. I felt it was episodic in nature. So I had abandoned it. Uh, Also, those were the days when I had the first beginnings of doubt about my journey um, in my political imagination, because I was very deeply influenced by leftists in not only in Kannada theatre, but also leftist writers from around the world. A lot of my friends in my college days were lefties, people I admired a lot, people I continue to admire a lot, and which had precluded some reading. So I had not read many things that I probably should have read by then. And I was also very westernized. I could kind of was not very much, although I came from a very Kannada family, I wasn't very steeped in not exactly steeped in Kannada culture. So I had neglected to read many of these works. But I had done a lot of theater, and that's how I encountered anything in Kannada culture, because of theater and because of my family's social circle. So when I picked up this book to do again, two things coincided, because I realized that S.L. Bhairappa was a writer who had grown not only during the years of neglect of writers like him by the official established intellectual set in India when it came to writing or really or anything else too, for that matter. But the thing is, he was not in the forefront of the intellectual imagination. I recently read a preface to another book on S.L. Bhairappa. I won't mention the name of the book or the person who wrote it, because I don't want to get into any trouble with these people. But it was full of condescension. Like this person knew what was properly intellectual and what was not, and he tried to hint that there's a difference between documentary writing, and there's a difference. If you talk like that in the world of film, that a documentary filmmaker is less than a feature filmmaker, people will laugh you out of the hall. But literary people are really they're like in science, what we call the flat earth society, that Carl Sagan speaks about. He says that there's a society called flat earth society who meet to prove that the earth continues to be flat. So many Indian intellectuals tend to be like that. Maybe around the world they are like that, because they don't want to change their mind in spite of overwhelming evidence. By the way, just to take that diversion, which is one of the reasons why you will see that the new liberalism, is so buddy, the club members with, along with, uh, left liberals around the world. They don't mind taking money from the people they had abused, maybe just a generation before also, because they think they're all part of the same revolution, whatever that is. So these were some of the things that went through my mind when I was given an opportunity again, because I had done two adaptations of novels, one by um, Rabindranath Tagore, Gora in 2011 or 12 I had done for Rangayana, Mysore, a government-funded repertory. Then later I was called again by the repertory, and I did a very difficult, what was considered a very difficult work in Kannada by another very neglected, extremely talented writer called Yashwant Chittal, a great Kannada writer who is not actually as celebrated as he should have been. I have a feeling that you wouldn't have heard of him, for instance. Won't fully be your fault. It's just that he was not as valorized as he should have been, when he was alive. 4 years after he died, actually in the previous, just past decade, I did his play. I think it was in 2016 or 2015. I did a play called Shikari, very deeply influenced by great psychologists of the past and Kafka. It was in my opinion, a very successful adaptation. So was Gora in many ways, although it was early days for me to try these adaptations. And I had done another adaptation previously for Ninasam, another repertory, which I had done Anant Murthy's novel as an adaptation. That was in 2003. Anant Murthy himself had liked it a lot, but the folk at Ninasam looked down upon it a little. But anyway, Anant Murthy had liked it a lot. So when I considered this book, one of the things that ran through my mind was that Bhairappa had been neglected by this establishment. He was not favored. He was not given fancy positions by the union government. He was not made director or chairman of film chamber or the film society. Not what we call it. It's not film. It's a society that runs the Pune Film Institute. He was not given any membership there. He was not made director or chairman. I don't think he had any great central positions. And he was considered a right-wing writer. And I also had considered him a right-wing writer till I read his life story, Citti. And I was really taken aback at the kind of life experience that he was able to recall and put down in that story about himself that he wrote. And I thought, not only was Bhairappa neglected by the establishment here in the Kannada literary world, but also by the establishment in the union government in those times. And the amazing thing was that he had thrived. Let me give you an example. When he publishes a new novel, by the end of the year, the novel will be seeing a third or fourth imprint. He's that popular. Right. When I was shooting in Bombay last month, and I told them that they asked me what I had been busy with, and I said I had adapted Bhairappa's Parva. A lot of Maharashtrians were there, people connected with Maharashtra theater and literature and music and so on. Every one of them was familiar with the work. And I was told just recently, I did a film in Delhi. I shot with a very, very good actor called Jitendra Joshi. Jitendra Joshi knew Bhairappa's Parva. Madhur Bhandarkar and his team knew Bhairappa's Parva. They say, and I found out that he's among the bestsellers in translation in Marathi. He's also the top 10. His translated works feature in the top 10 in all Hindi literature, He's a big writer, and he became very big without any support from the establishment. He's not been a recipient of the Gnanpith Award. And I once did an interview of Gnanpith winners, and I defended that, Bhairappa at that time, half-baked, and as I had not read all of his. I said, these writers who I admired a lot deserved, not that Bhairappa didn't deserve it, but, they deserved it ahead of him. I'm not so sure anymore. But the thing is, all this ran through my mind because it was going to be a challenge, not just in adaptation, but it was a challenge to my long-held political beliefs. And Parva was a startling book, I must say, even when I read it the first time. And then I read it in Kannada, and my wife will tell you how I would read it and read out a chapter to her after I adapted it into dialogue and drama. And I would have tears in my eyes, and many times I would have her weeping, just listening to the scene. So I decided to adapt, Bhairappa's novel. It was also possible, I must say, because of the director of Rangayana at that time, the director meaning the artistic director, not the play director, called Adanda Karyappa. Adanda Karyappa would not have been appointed as director of Rangayana had the government not changed. There was, remember, a BJP government before, but even then, it was wide. Those positions were always held as what we call the ecosystem. The ecosystem managed these positions, and they were held by people who are either straightforward leftist, or they were at least like moderate socialist position they had to take. So, and Denda Karyappa is nothing from it. He's a committed, self attested, right wing, in terms of political right wing person. And a person like that would not have been appointed had 2014 not happened in India, and had Yediyurappa government not come back again. It wouldn't have happened. So he was appointed, and if Adanda Karyappa had not been there, there is no question that I could have done an adaptation of a Bhairappa novel for Rangayana, because it was Karyappa who said that, Rangayana has been in existence for nearly 35, 36 years, but they have never taken up a Bhairappa work. In fact, during rehearsals of Parva, one day Bhairappa attended rehearsals, and he spoke after rehearsals. I mean, he spoke with with searing intelligence and penetration of the idea of theater. He really knew about it a lot, and he said, you people, I live in Mysore, but I have never come to Rangayana ever before, because this is a leftist organization. I've always believed, he said. Sadly, the point is that he had never been invited there as well. So this is the background. All this happened when I took it up. And what we did with it finally was that Adanda Karyappa and I first, and then I with the entire Rangayana team of actors and technical people, we decided to do it as a 8.5 hour adaptation with 4 intervals. And the opening shows, we've done 6 full shows of it now. And the 6 shows have all been to full houses. So yeah, we did that thing. It was a very successful production, and we probably would have toured all of Karnataka and if not India by now with it. But unfortunately, the last show we did was on March 28th, when the second wave was already beginning to rise really fast, and it had crossed, I think, the 1 lakh cases per day mark by then. And lockdowns were there, and we felt it was not responsible to do any more shows then. But actually, the full shows we did were without restriction. Like we did it in a 1,000-seater hall first, 3 full shows, and maybe 2,800 people saw it in the first 3 days. So it was, we had no restrictions then in mid-March. And then when we repeated 3 shows in end March, some little restrictions had come, not too many. Maybe we were 60% full, but in a smaller hall. But it was very well received. And we'll probably pick it up again. I'll need to stop at this stage talking about Parva, unless you ask me some questions. If I had trouble with it, if I had problems, I'll talk about it. Otherwise, I think that's enough for it, of it for now.
So actually, I'm really glad that you brought it up. I was waiting for you to come to that part, but we wanted to hear your journey about it. From what I've heard about the entire play, and a lot of your journey as well, and people like you, uh, uh, it's been very difficult, isn't it? There's been a lot of hassles. So can you specifically take us through what you had to face to get this out?
See, the thing is, a lot of people from the artistic Kannada world and the literary Kannada world, certainly, they don't like me. A lot of people do like me as well. I don't have any victimhood syndrome on this. It's just that a lot of people don't like me. People who like me before don't like me. There are some people who don't even talk to me, who were close friends before. Simply because in 2013, late 2013, I began to support Narendra Modi. Actually, that was it. That was all. And they saw this as a coincidence, the confluence of right-wing bigots doing a production of Parva. There was a Facebook, I wouldn't say a campaign, but a kind of snide remark kind of rubbish that people began to post on Facebook. One of them made a caste reference also, not referring to caste directly, but calling us, Sanatanis in a very derogatory way as well. And me, that is Bhairappa himself and me. And then they also began to attack it as a mega production. They said, God, too much money will be spent on it. And in any case, all that was a bit of trouble, simply because, we want to do a popular production that people have to watch. And even before we had taken up the play and announced a budget for it, and even before they know how the novel goes or how the play is going to play out, people were making completely ridiculous comments. Anyone who reads Parva will be startled at how, I hate to use that word, but how progressive it is and how critical it is of orthodoxy in India.
Right.
Be that as it may, the thing is that there was some trouble with that. But I think a lot of trouble came from misinformation. I can tell you something. See, I told the Rangayana team that I would like to design the play as intimate theater. They said, it's so much talk. Who will watch 8.5 hours on a small 20 by 30 stage? Who will watch for so long? I said, we need to give this. We'll need to give this play as intimate experience, because if you have read Parva, you'll realize it's a stream of consciousness type of writing. It's what Kunti imagines. A lot of it is what Kunti imagines, what Bhima imagines, or what any of these important characters imagines, or what they do, talk in very extremely intimate conversations, not in in public spaces or forums or in sabhas. So to bring what is completely intrinsic to the imagination of a person, or inner conflicts of a person, to dramatize it as as a dialogic conflicts. That means the immediacy, the granularity of conflict is that everything that you would do with the other character in opposition is seen in conflict. Your gesture, your move on stage, where you stand and look and address, the pitch of your voice, everything, all these semiotic values are as, or even more important than the semiotic value of just language, what you say, because what you mean is so much more important. What you feel is even more important than what you mean. So, I said to be able to bring out the kind of nuance, some examples of that I'll give also, that, Bhairappa, manages in the novel. To experience it for the audience, they need to see the eyes of the actors, and yet they must see the sweat, and the discoloration on the actor's skin when they're feeling. And I said, if you don't do that, they will not get the experience of that feeling, the aesthetic of the drama they'll not get. What we call the sthai bhava is not communicated, I said, or the sanchari bhavas, they will not get, I said. And they're very artistic. The actors of Rangayana, they're very experienced. They've been around for years together. They're very good directors, far more reputed than I. And they understood it and agreed, although with some trepidation because of the length of the play. The second decided was that nobody should doze off. So we wanted to do it during the day, because Rangayana had the experience of doing an all-night play, Kuvempu's magnum opus, Malegalalli Madhumagalu, with under a very, very competent, renowned director, Basavalingaya. So they wanted to emulate that, and that had some umpteen number of songs. I also said there'll be no songs, because I wanted to be as austere as the novel, I said. So when we took that up, well, the campaign was done by some senior theater people in Rangaya in Mysore, very close friends of mine, drinking pals actually, who just assumed it was a mega production without even giving a phone call to me. They ran a campaign. Actually, shame on them. I no longer would call them my friend or anybody's friend. They're completely useless people, who think revolution is actually doing, rubbish like this. So the thing is, but that really puts pressure on us, because then, you may need, let's say you need 50 lakhs for the production. Rangana actors are paid salaries. They're paid good salaries, okay? Like not as good as an IT salary or a college professor maybe, but they get, like maybe 80,000 rupees or 75,000 rupees a month, you know, and, I don't know whether they get housing and housing allowance and all that, but they get a reasonable salary, which is very expensive for a theater production. I mean, if you have an ensemble of, say, 25 or 30 people, and you have to pay salaries like that per month to do a production for one whole year, you can imagine what it can cost.
Right.
It would become a very expensive production, not because I was going to spend money on the production. It was going to become an expensive production because the structure and mechanism of Rangayana. Mind you, it's not like these people don't know this. It's just that they were willing to do that kind of mischief because I think they believe they have some ideological purity and anything goes, an ideological war perhaps, So that is one. It caused us a bit of trouble. And we had no money during the entire rehearsal phase. And towards the end of the rehearsal schedule, just 5 days to go before the show. No, actually, during the course of the rehearsal, the Minister for Culture at that time, Arvind Limbavali, came. I wasn't there at the rehearsals. He saw the rehearsals. I don't know what he felt. And he announced a grant of 50 lakhs. Mind you, you may think 50 lakhs is a lot of money, but by what I said, if you have to pay out salaries that amount to say 25 lakhs or 20 lakhs in a month for just actors, even during the rehearsal phase, what is 50 lakhs for a theater production itself, you tell me?
Right.
But at least that, then we could at least think of spending 5 or 6 lakhs on the play production for costumes, set and lights, because we wouldn't pay for the hall, because I said we'll use just Rangayana's mini theater for it. So, even with this kind of discipline and a hard, of budgeting, we were subjected to this abuse.
Right.
And, that 50 lakhs was certainly not going to be enough to take the play. That play deserves to travel. It needs to go all over India. It's really to every district, headquarters in Karnataka and artistic taluks in Karnataka. It should travel. But, that requires money. And money is like paying salaries to to the ensemble there. But when they travel, that means, to keep it for that length, you have to spend money. That's the budget. I wasn't going to spend it on production. We have 110 different costume ensembles, which was designed, by Prasad Bidappa, like gorgeous costumes. Mind you, for the entire costume thing, I think we spent some 3.5 or 4 lakhs,
Right.
including Prasad's fees. We had Sankirti doing the props, helmets and swords, not swords, helmets and other stuff, beautiful stuff, for which I think we spent about 1 lakh or 1.5 lakhs, because we were not spending on sets. We had to spend on at least these things. And we had just 22 actors playing the 110 roles, believe it or not. So, it was a very frugal production, which was made to look grand. But even then, this abuse was there. And finally, just 4 days or 3 days before the show, in his budget announcement, the just resigned Chief Minister Yediyurappa announced an allocation of 1 crore for the Parva production.
Right.
Again, abuse started. Some lefty type journalist called me and he said, Do you think so much should be spent on a play production? I said, I don't want to talk to you, and put the phone down. I don't know who it was that called. My point is, I don't think even now Rangayana has seen that 1 crore.
Right.
I certainly didn't see that 1 crore. And I want to place it on record, okay, that I haven't received even 1 rupee from Rangayana for adapting this play and directing it. It's not their fault, but because it was a frugal production, I turned down the fees. I didn't even take fees. And I believe somebody posted on Facebook that, I had received 1 crore for, helping the right wing with Bhairappa's novel, which is not at all a right wing novel, by the way. And then also now that I was going to do, maybe that person writes Manu Smriti, and I'll get some more money. I have nothing but contempt, for this crowd. So, I think even to spend time on what they mean is useless for me. But these are the kind of hassles. I'm sure it'll come when they start touring, in different places. You will have the 2-bit intellectuals, who will come and write some rubbish reviews. But I can tell you, it was a very popular production, and Bhairappa has got millions of fans in literature, more than I think all these intellectual writers put together. His books sell more than all the books put together of all other Kannada intellectual writers. And Bhairappa is a far superior aesthete and intellectual compared to these people. I will take back whatever words I've said in my lefty days, because I've met him, I've interacted with him closely, I've discussed the play with him, and I can tell you, he has the finest mind, is full of nuance, and is completely homegrown. He does not borrow, stuff from, somebody else around the world. I won't name big Indian authors who do this. Sometimes they won't even acknowledge it. Okay, but he is not like that. He has an Indic imagination, and he has an original mind, and is brave enough, to write stuff that he believes in. He doesn't cater or pander to any intellectual market.
So thank you so much for sharing that with us. So that brings me to a very important question. Now, when we look at cinema, Indian cinema as an entire entity of its own, I know that's doing a lot of injustice to it. But Indian cinema is known as this whole entity from outside, right? Like people only know Bollywood and nothing beyond that. And what we see here in India, from state to state, from district to district, and from region to region, you have different languages, you have different cultures, and somehow art and culture sort of resonates and reflects all of this. So, in your experience, why do you think the limitation is there within India as well, and abroad? And how has your journey sort of changed your views on this?
See, there's a very simple idea on this. We very early on, India adopted a kind of Soviet style model where the state would recognize who was an artistic achievement. They'll say this is a good artist. They'll recognize a sculptor, or a painter, or a musician, or a playwright, or a novelist, or a poet. The state will, or a filmmaker, the state will recognize the artistic achievement, and the market was invalid. Like it was, you have to assume that people who pay money and go and watch a film, or pay money and buy a book, are not as brilliant as the jury that the state selects. And, so it became a kind of incestuous thing where the people who won awards will then get into the jury. I won the national award once, and I got into the jury. And, then I was allowed to select, awardees after that. So it becomes kind of incestuous, vicious circle of recognition, artistic recognition. Even the critical culture is such, because, India has a very funny culture of even awarding critics. The Swarna Kamal, the highest medal for Indian cinema world, is given to critics also in India. And you if you just do a search of these critics, they largely belong to the left school, or if not left, they'll have a certain mockery of populist stuff, and a bulk of them. You can actually just go through that list. This has happened everywhere. So a place that get invited to Delhi for the national festival that happens there every year, or people who get to make it to the central government thing of, say, even Padma Awards or any other awards, they all come from this thing, which is the reason why people who perhaps had an intellectual bent of mind, who actually would like to do stuff that they passionately believe in, stayed away from the market. They did not want to go reach out to people as much as they wanted to reach out to festivals in the world. So it became such a thing that we have a culture where it is very possible in the last 20, 30, 40 years in India that many films have been made and they have received the national award, but nobody outside this circle has seen them. So it becomes a nation recognizing award, but the nation hasn't seen it. So it's better to say that the state actually recognizes the artist. The nation has failed to notice the artist. That kind of problem has happened. So that is, in sum, the answer to that question.
Right. I mean, speaking about how movies are taking shape these days, I mean, thanks to the intervention of social media, at least, there's a lot of historical inaccuracies that are being pointed out. And in the disguise of artistic freedom and freedom of speech and expression and whatever you may call it, a lot of historical inaccuracies are being glorified. I mean, I won't take the names of many of these movies, but there have been some of the biggest blockbusters in India. And when there is a reaction to that, you label that certain community as being intolerant, you label that certain community as being opposed to certain fundamental rights. So, how do you view a lot of these things happening now and the intervention of popular lot on social media?
See, I am against censorship. In principle, I hate it. I think you should not have censorship. I think what you can have is law. If you do something that is really offensive, you put the person in prison, you have clauses in law for it. I don't think, a bunch of people should sit and say this is fit for public viewing. I think it's nonsense, I think, you can say even the court is a bunch of people, but the court is guided by constitution and the law and by precedent and all that. But what happens with censorship is that you do it in a partisan way. When the liberal governments were there in India, if we have to consider the Modi government as a non-liberal government, when the liberal governments were there in India, they have banned many books and many movies. In Karnataka, when the Siddaramaiah government was there, they banned 2 books by Kannada authors. Now, if you ban Wendy Doniger's book in India, Wendy Doniger's book can continue to be on the New York Times bestseller list. But if you ban a Kannada book in Karnataka, what will happen to those authors? So I don't think these people are per se against censorship. Even now, that the state is that the center is moving some laws, amending the laws concerning cinema, and they're removing the right of appeal. If a film has been banned by the censors, they could go to an appellate tribunal before, or a panel before, but that has been scrapped, and they're very upset with that. But you see, they don't ask for banning the censor board itself. I'm saying do away with the censor board. Why do you want to be regulated? But these people want regulation because they're hopeful, and why not? That they'll come back to power one day and they can continue to ban, other political views, or historical distortions that don't appeal to them. So this is what it is. So I'm against censorship. I think you should remove censorship altogether, and it doesn't make it any better to do retaliatory censorship. Okay. Having said that, I will say that the history project in India also has suffered from exactly the same thing I told you about the artistic project, that the state picks up people they think are historians, and they get validated somewhere else. Okay, some Indian historian gets validated, let's say in California or in Chicago or someplace like that. And you'll say that this person has been validated by some top university in the West. So this guy's a top, or this lady is a top historian. The one of the great books of history that India had, the History of British India, written by the father of the philosopher John Stuart Mill, James Mill. That history of India was written without him ever stepping into India.
Right.
It's like, Max Muller, who is the great authority on the Vedas and Upanishads and so on. Although all these existed not really as writing as much as in discourse, in Maukika, as we say, in the oral tradition. He never came to India, but I never met an Indian scholar. And this is what we got, remember, this is what we have inherited. Even in the early days of independence, this is what we had. You never looked at your historians, people who knew your stuff. So these people are considered great historians by whom? By themselves. It's like the National Film Awards and the National Literary Awards. See, if you do away with state endorsement in these award ceremonies or in these award giving, then actually a lot of it will improve. It'll be shabby and messy, like Indian elections. Imagine if you didn't have democracy in a country like this, what would have happened? So I think that is the problem there. I would really, I'll request whoever there thinks he's right wing and whoever thinks he's left wing and whoever thinks he's moving to just leave history writing to people who are interested in history, not people who are interested in Marxism or Hindutva or any other persuasion. Somebody who's interested in science should do science. Somebody who's interested in Marxism should write, maybe a good biography of Karl Marx or something, or some other Marxist. I don't think they should try to write the history of Vijayanagar. That's what I think. I'm not going to ban them, but I certainly don't want my money paid in taxes to be given to to fatten their bums. That's what I'll say.
I'm really glad you brought this up because I think a few years ago, when there were a string of murders against artists and journalists, there was a very controversial statement that you made, the statement that became controversial rather. So if I could simply revisit it and to contextualize that in a post 2014 environment, you basically called the intelligentsia vulgar. And I think a lot of people, not just in our audience, but that's become the popular sentiment. The intelligentsia has lost its credibility. The Lithians Club, as it was called, has been sort of dismantled, is what they say, and the intelligentsia has become more provincial in nature. So currently, how do you see that transformation in a post 2014 India?
A lot of Indians are poor, and we just saw, what happens when you don't have enough infrastructure for healthcare, in India. And I don't want to join the blame game of blaming the Kerala government or the Maharashtra government or the Delhi government or the West Bengal government or the Karnataka government or the national government.
Right.
I think India as a country, we as a people, we were not prepared. We haven't built the necessary redundancy. I know it sounds like a contradiction, but we need redundancy. Just like the river needs a large space to flow. It may not flow like that for 40 years, but on the 41st year, it'll occupy that entire space. And if you have encroached that part and built property there, you'll get washed away. That's what has been happening in this country. So we need redundancy, for a health crisis, but we didn't have it, and we saw what kind of tragedy can happen. And, we should be concerned about that. And I think it is very necessary that the best minds in India engage with an idea of how we can actually become a better nation that can actually meet the constitutional goals or even the idealism, respond to the idealism of the others, of the Indian Constitution. The problem now is that none of these worthies, these so-called intellectuals, none of them are even useful, in actually transporting somebody from their place to a hospital. They probably wouldn't know the address of that hospital. And, if they fall ill, if they're very top class intellectuals, they'll get state support for their, for their misery. They don't go to some small government hospital like poor people or middle class people have to. See, they're utterly useless. What will you do with them? You look at the great natural disasters that have happened in this country. I'll tell you one of the greatest, gravest crises confronting the world, and it'll probably hit a country like India the hardest, will be, climate change. We will have shortages of food and water, and, we'll have disease, we'll have more pandemics perhaps because of that, because of temperature change and all that.
Right.
What these people? They're very good to write articles, in brilliant English against somebody they don't like, particularly, the prime minister or some other popular minister in government. They'll write, and they may be right or wrong, but they're utterly irrelevant. Print carried an article this week. They've carried, I think you should look it up. They have done a survey of some 1,500 people, or just short of 1,500 people, with an organization called Prashnam. And that organization has asked this question on this Pegasus scandal. It's current and ongoing. So that's really illustrates what I'm saying. And only 15% of those people have heard of Pegasus, okay, of the people they've met. So Narendra Modi should not worry about 85% of the people, okay? Then in those 15 people, more than 50% think that Pegasus is another vaccine for COVID or something like that. Really, I mean, like, it's as ridiculous as that, okay? But, see the noise that happened during the COVID thing. And I thought something useful will come, that that in Parliament's time will be used, that the government will be challenged to increase the budget for health infrastructure in the country, maybe cut down what is spent on defense. I know it's an unpopular view, maybe in some quarters, what I'm saying, but one time dramatically increase the infrastructure for health and for education, because we probably will have to go into a virtual world substantially in the future for education. No, they're boycotting Parliament. Trust me, 20 at least of those 22 bills that are there will be passed without any discussion. And these people will blow up all their time on Pegasus because they're lazy and dangerously, they're guided by intellectuals who will tell them that this is an important issue. It must be an important issue, maybe for a play or a film. But the country is facing serious crisis. I'm sure it's an important matter, prying tapping into people's phones, not a good thing. But you know what? I was a journalist in 1986 when the Ramakrishna Hegde government was involved in a telephone tapping scandal. And now it's become the norm. It's, you'll have to tell me whether it's illegal. This is what I mean. See, this irrelevance is a great problem. And the reason I said that the intellectuals are irrelevant is that they spend all their time on nonsense. Nothing they say will matter simply because they prefer to speak in English in the first. They prefer to write in English. 1% of the Indian population listens or watches English language shows. 1 or 1.5%, that's it. Okay. So, they're very happy to stay where they are. And as a supporter, of Narendra Modi, I continue to be a supporter in spite of so many problems that have happened, simply because I cannot trust the competence of these people in looking at a problem. Forget analyzing it, even looking at it. They never look at Indian issues. They never look at climate change. They never look at environment. They never come to any of the protests that you do. They will participate in an environment protest if they think that the government that is there of the day can be attacked by some way. That is the reason they'll be there. They'll not be there if their own government is there. Like now the Karnataka BJP government, they in the early days they began to talk about elevated corridors, and it was an old idea. That has everyone seems to love elevated corridors. It's like sugar, bacteria, virus. Everyone loves it. So I said, I met the BJP, leaders here, along with some people, and I said we will go and agitate if they do it, and we should do that. That you should stand up for fundamental ideas of right and wrong. And it does not matter who does right, you need to support it, and who does wrong, you should criticize it. That honesty or integrity is broadly lacking. I know I'm painting it with a very broad brush, but broadly lacking in the Indian intellectual class. So I think young people have to work.
Because there is another trend recently, which is hatred towards Sanskrit, that's sort of taking the waves these days. If you, I think I came across a Facebook post very recently. I think it's a Mysore-based Sanskrit daily, and it's the only one in India. And that was about to shut down until there was an intervention from outside. People gathered some money, and then again they are getting some advertising revenue. So why is there this particular fascination or hatred against Sanskrit from a particular section?
I think it was always there, but I don't think it was this loved or this ugly before. See what has happened to that system, where the same bunch of people occupied every field. They became judges. You've heard this before, right? In courts, they became professors in universities. They became editors of papers. They became jurors for awards of all kinds. They became heads of many organizations. They were appointed as, chairman of various boards and corporations of the government. So they had places to occupy, and they could easily proscribe. If somebody came up with a Sanskrit idea, they could keep that person out easily. Like they formed the majority, and they could keep out even an SL Bhairappa. It didn't matter. It's very easy for them to do that. So, but now the Narendra Modi government is aggressive. It clearly understands this, and it's not just the government. The Sangh Parivar gets this very clearly. They are changing you must understand the agitation that happened in Pune to remove the chairman was a very symbolic agitation. It was not a real matters agitation, because the chairman is nobody. That guy had visited, Pune Institute only twice in his entire tenure. After he didn't go there even once when the agitation was there, and he didn't matter. He was a government appointee. Like in Karnataka government, you appoint somebody as BWSSB chairman or BDA chairman. He can be a person who didn't get a Minister of State post, and he'll get a compensatory post. That's it. He's a useless post, that is. The real problem there is there's an FTII society that runs it. That society has only 3 years as a term. Every member is appointed by the INB ministry. The term of the government, hopefully, is always 5 years. And the government controls this so-called autonomous organization. And these people understand it, but they never ask for that change, because that is fundamental autonomy. And they don't want. They want a state-run economy. They want a state-run academia. They want a state-managed artistic world, and they want a state-managed imagination of India, but they want it by the state they support. They do not support this state. That is the difference, I think. And they can deny it as much as they want, but it doesn't matter. So what I'm trying to tell you is that if they make a lot of noise about Sanskrit now, you shouldn't worry. I will worry if the government does not take strong action to ensure that while you have the right to protest, the government should do what is right anyway. And this does not mean whether I support Sanskrit or not. If you ask me, and you can say that, I have a remaining, what a residual disease of leftism in me, I'll tell you, it's the same thing of conflating Urdu with Muslims.
Right.
Urdu is Indian. Pakistan took it from India. Urdu is Indian. And Urdu is not a Muslim language. It's an Indian language. It's a beautiful language and we should support it. And I know many people in the Sangh Parivar who can recite Urdu very well too. Let me tell you, it's true. The thing is, you should not conflict Sanskrit with, say, Brahmins. None of the Upanishads, I think. I don't know if anyone was written by the Brahmin. Okay, by all this stuff was written by all kinds of, Ved Vyas was of mixed thing, and Valmiki was not a Brahmin. So this thing to conflate Sanskrit with Brahmin is a dumb enterprise of the previous leftist intellectual class. They engage themselves in this, so you shouldn't worry. You should worry if the government does not do the right thing. I think in a democracy, you should tolerate noise. You should allow them to speak.
Right.
See, I could do Parva finally. They're dangerous if they stopped it.
Right.
If they're not so effective, we shouldn't mind.
I'm glad you arrived at that because I have a bit of a personal question to ask you, and you may completely choose to not answer it as well. I mean, you have been off social media for a while now, and I have gone through a similar experience, and a lot of the people who have slightly even so-called conservative views have been targeted, right? Because we all grew up in liberal institutions, and there is a sense of liberal bias that we face. We are shamed into thinking that what we equate with is somehow wrong and injustice. Has also been bullied on social media, and that really concerns me, especially because I know you so well and the world knows you so well. So if you're comfortable about it, could you talk about the incident where you wrote a post on social media about the West Bengal violence, but the kind of reactions you got? Could you take us through it? And we'll end with this.
No, I'm willing to answer that. I was hurt. That's why I left. I was not so much hurt because of the negative campaign that was done against me. I was somewhat hurt that people who had known me for a while, I don't mean my lefty friends. I mean people I've associated with in the last 3 or 4 years in whatever in green ecological activism stuff that I have done, or friends from Aam Aadmi Party with whom I've been very friendly. I've been a great supporter of Aam Aadmi Party, although this may come as a shock to some people. I have done a lot of voluntary work for them in the past. I felt really bad that either deliberately or for whatever reason, they misunderstood me for prejudice. I'll tell you briefly what happened. I had COVID. And in that time, I had lost 12 kilos and I was really weak. So I was not reading papers or following news in that 14-day period when I had COVID. And then the 6 days that I spent, in altogether, those 14 days that I had COVID and I had to be hospitalized for those 6 days also, I was not following the news. I was discharged from hospital on the 1st of May. And I think on the 2nd or 3rd of May, in the middle of the night, I couldn't sleep because although I had recovered, my sleep pattern, everything was very disturbed. And I got up and I read news for the first time. And I saw that in Bengal, results had come. And for some 36 hours at that point of time, I was reading some pogrom-like things were happening by supporters of the winning side were attacking. Apparently, there were reports that they were attacking, establishments owned by, supporters of BJP. And I was completely alarmed because, and I quoted an example and I sent this. I said, when this happened in Godhra, that time a friend of mine, a left liberal, had called me and said, these sadhus deserved it. They were taught a lesson. I said, it's a very bad way to talk because I said there can be a retaliation and it will be extremely dangerous. And that's what happened. And I said, the thing in Gujarat was that it was immediate because there's an overwhelming majority, that prevailed in Gujarat at that time. It was like 8% to 90% kind of thing. It was the Hindu-Muslim ratio. And I said, it's because of that it happened instantly. In of course, in West Bengal, it'll not happen immediately because firstly, they are the winning side, and there is a substantial Muslim population in West Bengal, but a retaliation will come. And because the government and the intellectual class at that time, nobody had made a comment. Actually, after my post and all the reactions, I saw that the left actually took objection to what the Trinamool government was doing, and then there was an objection raised even in Congress, I think, because their cadre was attacked. It's like saying violence is okay if it happens to some other people. It's not the principle itself of violence. So the thing is, nobody had done. So I wrote in distress and great anger. And, I used harsh language. And I said, already it is too late. A retaliation will come. And it is sickeningly inevitable, I said, and it will be brutal. And I said, and it'll be vengeful. I don't remember, some word like that. All negative words, not praising the retaliation, saying it's a sickening thing about India that retaliation happens. And they said that this was actually an instigation to do communal violence. Now, my point is that, I asked the Aam Aadmi leader who called me and said, "Sir, did you post this?" I said, "Do you object to a single line in what I said?" And, this person said, "No, sir, but we don't want you to join that side in this kind of argument." I said, "What that side, this side? Do you disagree with a single line?" He said, "No, sir." There was another Aam Aadmi leader who spoke to me, and I asked him, and he said, a big leader, you will know him actually. And he told me, "See, this is a valid question, and we need to bring this up in a public debate. But I don't see the question brought up in any public debate." And because my daughter said, "Appa, this is very harsh language for you to say, retaliation will come. Why don't you say that, that there is a danger of retaliation, and please desist, take action against these people who are doing these pogroms and ask the government to stop them." I wrote an apology about the harshness of my language, not changing. And I reiterated with the data, and I said, "See, in the last 100 years, since the partition of Bengal has been a communal cauldron.
Right.
Things have never changed. And, and in no communal riot in India, from this side or that side, whoever has instigated it has gone unanswered. There is always a sickening, brutal, completely mob-driven retaliation in India." I said, that is what I meant. But I don't think whether people bought it or not, because I didn't remove that post from Facebook. I just left Facebook because I felt if there is no forum of debate, I don't mind people criticizing me. If people can stand up for what I said, if nobody who in my friend group is going to stand up to what I said, who don't agree with what I said, then I don't want to be in such a group. So I left.
So I think this has been a very interesting interview, a lot of revelations, a lot of insights. And I think a lot of people like me, and a lot of people who are like me, who have gone through the same experiences as you have, will be able to resonate and relate to a lot of the things that you've told today. So thank you so much for agreeing to speak to us. We hope you're in good health now. I was supposed to ask.
Thank you. Yeah.
Please excuse me for that. Sir, again, thank you so much, and thank you for joining us. We hope to have you again on the Festival of Bharat and Citti Media. Namaste, sir.
Thank you, Sharan. Thank you, Festival of Bharat team, and thank you, Citti Media. Thank you very much.
For our viewers who are listening to this and watching this, please do like, share, and subscribe. This is your host, Sharan Citti, signing off. Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste. We hope you enjoyed this Citti Media content. Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.